Sol, and I am a level 1 cook. I am Lucia Scarpa. I am a level 2 cook.
I'm Isidro, a professional cook with 12 years experience.
I'm a producer for this channel and not a regular cook. I'm a professional chef with a restaurant in Mallorca, Spain, and work as a private chef for artists. Despite having featured in a previous video due to public demand, or lack thereof, I've returned. Today, some level 1 meat empanadas, which are vegetarian.
Today we are going to cook some knife-cut meat empanadas. We choose loin for the cut.
Today we are going to make a meat empanada. We'll begin by preparing a veal base from ossobuco.
Really, the only thing I replace is minced meat, truly with minced trout, made from soy.
We're also going to make our own dough with herbs. We're going to cure a yolk, and we're going to make a caper mayonnaise.
Well, step number 1.
Chop the vegetables. Here we have half a kilo of tenderloin. It's very simple. We're going to try to make sure it's well chopped. I prefer it this way, first strips and then we cut it again.
I chose the ossobuco because it's a cut base. It's a great product if well treated. Sometimes good or high cuisine is misunderstood with expensive product, and it's not often necessary, but with good technique you can achieve an excellent final product. And it's not necessary to spend a lot of money to get to a good meal. The first thing we have to do with the ossobuco is to coat it in flour.
What empanada doesn't have onion? The onion is such a noble fruit.
I'm a vegetarian, but I have no problem cooking meat. It doesn't disgust me.
Now we're going to start breading the ossobuco in flour. The color that this tan, this burn that we're going to give to the ossobuco provides us with that darkness we're looking for.
To him,
I'm going to give it to the middle. In another video, some comments told me they thought I was a little tipsy. I talk like this.
For me, a meat empanada has to have hard-boiled egg, so we start by cooking them for about 8 minutes.
For me, the filling of the empanada has to be quite uniform, without large pieces of anything. As I mentioned, I don't use egg in it.
For me, the perfect combination is butter and olive oil.
When we combine both, what we achieve is like a higher smoke point, which means it can withstand higher temperatures. 2.5 kilos of ossobuco. Don't forget, the collagen in ossobuco comes from its central bone. We are going to proceed to mark the ossobuco. We need to give it a lot of heat, let it tan, let it burn.
I want them in small cubes. You do this and you get tiny squares. Still.
No, we add the salt because we don't want it to release a lot of juice. We need it to seal. Let's go.
Let's see the golden color it has. Let's remove this. We also take care of our fat that is here, so it doesn't get fully consumed. If we see that the fire is too strong, we lower it. Always be attentive to our cooking everything.
In sight, life is better with garlic. Here the pan is already quite hot. It was silent and not too hot. Stop.
For this amount of filling, the ideal is the same amount of meat as onions. Mostly so that later the juices in the empanada are well concentrated by the onion. So we're going to start by peeling it and we're going to cut it into wedges. It's called julienne. And we make a brunoise, but a bit larger than the traditional brunoise.
2.64 pounds of onion. What we do now is peel it, always a container to leave the waste. I make a little cut from here, precisely erased, and then I send the finger and take off the first layer. We start cutting the little onions. I like to work in a chain, so to speak. What's the meaning of working in a chain? We seize and slice, like halving now. Once we have all the halves, we move on to cut everything. Well, here we put another pot with a lid for the compote. Why with a lid? Because we need to keep all the moisture in, not let all the liquids evaporate.
Tearing up from the onion, I pause this video to ask you to subscribe and like below.
When it has this color, we're going to remove it from the heat. It's
heating up, it's getting hot, and we throw in a good chunk of lard. We can also add a little bit of oil.
Now a little lower heat, medium fire, so the onion cooks nice and slow.
Now what we also do is add a little bit of salt so it starts to release the liquids. It's not salting it to the point that I want it for finishing the dish, it's just adding a little bit. Then at the end of the recipe, you adjust it to the point that you like the salt, pepper, whatever you need.
On the other hand, the eggs are ready, so we remove them.
We can add a little bit of lemon. Now, while we have finished marking our shank, we are going to use a little bit of wine. The mirepoix are irregular cuts of vegetables. Now what we are going to do, in the same pot we have all the juices from the shank, and with the wine we lift them. We are going to wait for it to bring a little bit of boiling, evaporate all the alcohol, and once the alcohol evaporates, we put everything else to cook. Let's go.
Let's add a little bit of red bell pepper and green bell pepper.
And also, what is a meat pie without a snout? We remove the...
Yes, no, like the top tip, the root, I'm unsure what it is. So it would be a very tiny brunoise. First we cut it into very thin strips and then into little squares.
There are always 1,000 ways to cut the bell pepper, however you want to call it. I like to cut it this way, but always making the most of everything. The same here, all uneven cuts, roughly maintaining an average size.
I don't know how chefs do it. I can't not eat while I cook.
This is what we have, which turned out quite small. And we're going to add it to our filling.
To start pouring all our ingredients together, because they all go in and come out together. Now what I'm doing is cleaning the leek. I removed its leaves, and what I always do is make a cut and make a cross here at the top, and the bottom part I simply cut with this little piece that we take out. What we do is try to use some of the layers. We make the bouquet garni, which is basically a bundle of herbs to flavor and give a little more taste to our preparations.
I'm already adding the garlic, so the garlic also cooks quite a bit.
Now the meat has released all its juices, the onion too, everything has come together. We are going to season. For me, the three that never fail are sweet paprika, ground chili, and cumin. Salt to taste, done. Our filling is ready. We turn off the heat and we are going to let it cool down a bit. Nothing, maybe 10 minutes so it's not so hot and doesn't contrast too much with the dough.
The ship carries, in this case, thyme, parsley, and we are also going to put some celery leaves. And the boiling, in this case, it's no problem. The issue is it remains intact. Leek, celery, all evenly cut. Here we had, as I said a little while ago, the bouquet with thyme, parsley, and now we add some celery sticks. Let's go with the pot with the wine and add the meat.
Well, it's cooking here. Let's throw in the bell peppers. We're gonna add a little bit more and that's it.
We also add the blood from the cebucos. Now we just add water until it's covered. To all this, what we do is go tangling the ship with the thread, and in the end we take the ends and make any little knot. Here I have the two ships like this, and as we have it, we pull here. We also have small garlics to crush. To crush is to grab them, press them a little bit with the knife, little by little with force as you want, but it breaks the structure a bit.
We'll add a hard-boiled egg and olives. The olives aren't too big, ensuring a uniform filling, as previously discussed. Now let's proceed with the meat. This is where you add minced meat. Really, I usually use a vegetable meat that looks a lot like minced meat, really the same texture. This time, I couldn't find it. I'm using a version that comes in little blocks and can be mashed while cooking. So this goes into the pan.
We simply toss the tomato in. Pim, this will start to cook slowly.
I'm not going to add cumin. I'm not going to add it. I understand the taste it gives. It's very good. But I prefer to add a bell pepper. The smoked one is better because it will also help my purpose of it tasting like meat and not like trout meat. So I add quite a bit. It also helps with the color, which is nice. And a little bit of ground chili. This we were talking about, that it's a little bit spicy. Just a little bit like this. Look. From tomato extract, I'm going to continue breaking the meat blocks, not meat, and I'm going to take it off the heat so it cools down a little bit now.
What we're going to do is cure the yolks, and this yolk simply is going to be next to our empanada, accompanying it, so that we can spread it there and that it's a game more within the dish. I have a scale. I start to weigh the salt, and there I threw 4.23 ounces, and now we're going to try to weigh the same. We stop from sugar. Now what we're going to do is simply separate the yolk from the white, and now we place it directly here. Now that we have the yolks here placed, then more or less we do it half and half. We don't have to be very exact either. Cure some product, we can cure. There are the sausages, we can cure. Pork, shoulder, meat, peseto, whatever we want. Through a process of liquid absorption. The sugar, the salt helps us, especially the salt actually helps us with this process. Well, and this, we already have the yolks covered. We let it rest for about half an hour, 40 minutes.
To complete the filling, we'll end with something very fresh. From the green onion, we are going to add the green part. We are going to add this to our filling. Now we are going to add our eggs that we previously boiled.
Well, this has been cooking for a while. Now what we need is to skim the mixture because these are the impurities of the meat.
Here we have the purchased empanada lids. You obviously can imagine that I'm not going to make my own lids.
For empanadas. I used to always buy empanada lids at the supermarket too, but once you know how easy this recipe is, you won't stop making it. We're going to start in a bowl by putting 1.1 pounds of 4 zeros flour. Now,
What we're going to do, we're going to flavor our butter. I already have thyme and rosemary here, and what we have here are parsley leaves. Now this leaf cut is called chiffonade, and it consists of joining all the leaves, pressing them well, and it's a very precise cut of the leaves. Now we mix the remaining herbs. We need to chop this very, very well because it's going to be part of our dough.
we're going to melt 3.52 ounces of butter. Here,
We have 3.52 ounces of room temperature butter, which means it's softened, it's at room temperature. We're going to add our herbs and mix everything.
meanwhile, we're going to make a well in the middle of our bowl, and on the side, we're going to make a brine. We're going to put 7 ounces of water, and we're going to add salt to taste.
1.1 pounds of 000 flour.
Once we have the butter melted, we're going to add it to the center.
We add the fat last, okay? 150 water, 15 salt, and
We are going to add the brine.
it's good to have a horn or some tool like that to mix the dough, but for me the best tool is always the hands.
If you need a little more water, you can add it.
3.52 ounces of flavored butter. I have loose flour. I still have dough that hasn't managed to stick together. I add a little bit of water.
Once you've perhaps formed a dough like this, we're going to throw it on the table.
What I do is knead it a bit, look for uniform themes.
Once you stretch it, you start adding the flour that you have left, so you incorporate all the flour that is left on the counter. Now what we need is for it to rest for a while, about half an hour.
We leave the dough. If it can rest in the cold, good. If not, it'll take about half an hour outside our countertop. Now what we're going to do is make the caper mayonnaise that goes along with our empanada, have our cured yolk.
Prepare a Creole sauce to accompany the empanadas.
Jar mayonnaise, capers, a lime and chives. What we are going to do is chop the chives, cut them. We also chop the capers. We are going to use only the skin of the lime, and we mix everything. That's simple. We throw a little bit of flake salt. Let's
Start by cutting tomato, chives, bell pepper, onion. Once we have all the ingredients chopped, we are going to add a drizzle of olive oil, pepper, a little bit of salt and vinegar, and we are going to add a drizzle here.
We have our onion already finished, very juicy, and we simply remove it. We wait for it to cool down. Here we have finished cooking our shank from our base, the demi-glace. We are going to see it now. It's this full pot. It keeps reducing. All the flavors are concentrating and also packing. The collagen part, which is what makes it form this gelatin that we call demi-glace. Further reduction can make it glaze. Now we'll split the vegetables and meat. We also have part of the bone, the snail, as I said before. We're going to return that to the bottom. We're going to put the meat here, and we have to be attentive to chunks of fat. And what we're going to do is start breaking this ready meat with our juice, our stewed onion, and we start to mix. There we would have the filling. We would have to wait for it to cool down, and while it cools down, we are going to stretch the dough. We are going to cut it. The
Dough is super malleable. We are going to start by sprinkling the table, and we proceed to stretch with a rolling pin here.
We have our demi-glace that is almost ready. It lacks very little. And now we are going to start with our empanada lid. We lower in parts, quarters, halves. As you want, we color a bit the countertop just to give it knead. For me, the ideal is to stretch in the shape of a circle, since we are going to make all circles so that we do not lose so much amount of dough. Meanwhile, we preheat the oven, maximum oven. We are going to reduce it. We are going to cut it a bit. We mount it again. We continue to work neat. And in that way, later when we grab the cutter, we can calculate the cuts much better. More
More or less, this is the thickness that...
The dough should be somewhat see-through, correct?
Here we have a cutter, and we're going to start cutting tablespoon.
Of filling. In my left hand, I have the thing, well,
Here we already have the lids. We have our filling without the demi. We're going to strain it. We put the lid in our palm of the hand. We're going to add a spoonful of filling, because once we assemble them, we close them and there's no turning back. So now we have to try it. and we season, it lacks salt because we hadn't put salt until now. We're also going to put in a bit of pepper, and I like to put in a bit of ground chili. I'll fry, not bake them, as I prefer that method. We're going to start heating the oil while we start assembling the empanadas. We're going to put film on our scale, about 1 empanada, 2.1 ounces, 2.469 ounces, that's ideal.
Indeed, it was a lot of filling, but it doesn't matter, we're going to make it work. I prick the top first and then go to the sides. You can leave it as is, it's valid.
Once we fill it, we're going to close it.
Whether we need water for the edges depends on the empanada's moisture.
The ideal is always to have a bowl of water next to you to be able to always wet the edge and stick it without any problem. You grab it as if it were the little triangle that remains and you close it. You grab and close, you grab and close. Otherwise, another very easy crimp is with a fork. You poke all the edges. The one with the fork is great.
What I always do is press inward a bit and you get another little point sticking out, and then you push that back in. And that's how you start forming little triangles, like little points.
Here we already have the empanadas ready, perfect for going into the oven. Well, I've put them here.
I have the oven preheated.
Well, now what we're going to do, we're going to start dropping our empanadas into the oil. Ensure they don't stick and have room. As they're ready, place them on paper to soak up oil. Well,
How many empanadas do you all eat?
I will put 3 for me at this point is ideal. We have our Creole sauce on one side, and now we are going to add our empanadas.
what we are going to do, we are going to position 1, 2 empanadas with the size, the amount we want, a good spoonful of mayonnaise, and our yolks cut in half.
These are my level 1 empanadas. As I told you, I'm vegetarian, so I'm not going to try them, but our editor Juan is going to try them.
Now let's try the empanada.
To me, this tastes like meat. It's really good. It is.
Really good.
Some mayo, capers, half yolk, delicious.
Thank you.